Hi guys, we're going to talk about chapter 1. Chapter 1 is just really diving into the foundations of mental health and mental illness. So I think the first thing you just have to ask yourself is, what does mental health mean? Not mental illness, but what does mental health mean? And really that's that ability to realize your own abilities. You can cope with normal stressors of life, and you have the ability to productively work and contribute to a community. And that is being mentally health. So as we define mental health, it's an emotional, psychological well-being of an individual who has the capacity to interact with others. They can deal with ordinary stress, and they can perceive one's own surrounding realistically. As we keep thinking about this wellness side, wellness is being in good physical and mental health. Improving physical health can benefit our mental health and vice versa. Wellness is not the absence of disease. So you can still really work on improving your physical and mental health even in the presence of disease. It doesn't mean you have the absence of disease because we're talking about wellness. There are 8 dimensions of wellness. You can see those there on that little flower. Emotional, financial, social, spiritual, occupational, physical, intellectual, and environmental. Mental health problems significantly impact the process of wellness. Individuals with mental health problems are more likely to die decades earlier than that general public from preventable diseases. People with serious mental health problems often face social, economic, and/or environmental disadvantages that can really result in a lack of access to healthcare, lack of information, and lack of culturally and linguistically competent care programs. So let's think about the traits of mental health. When we think about mental health, that provides people with rational thinking, communication skills, learning, emotional growth, resilience, and self-esteem. How many of you remember mental illness as having behaviors that were considered either strange or different? So what we have learned is thinking about mental illness in a way that makes us very judgmental. So what does mental illness refer to? It refers to a psychiatric disorder that have a definable diagnosis. There can be manifestations and significant dysfunctions related to development, biological, and physiological disturbances. The ability to think might be impaired. So if we think about our Alzheimer's patients, emotions could be affected. That's when we start thinking about our depressed patients. Behavioral alteration could be apparent. So maybe our schizophrenic patients. Patients maybe in some cases display a combination of each of those alterations. So you may see the ability to think and emotions are altered, the ability to think and their behavior is altered. So those are your 3 typical misbehaviors. You could have one or multiple of one. So as we look at our mental health continuum, mental health is that general condition of people in the category are well, right? We are able to help with our stressors, we can cope with our stressors, we can function in community. So we're on that very end of that spectrum or that continuum with our mental health. We might experience some stress occasionally, some mild stress, but it really doesn't impair our daily function. So an example of someone here may spend a day or 2 under a dark cloud of self-doubt, maybe a sleepless night, worrying, but they're aware of this and they can still function well and find coping mechanisms to help alleviate those concerns. At the opposite end of this continuum is mental health problems. So emotional problems or concerns with mild to moderate distress and impairment. So maybe we're losing sleep, we've lost our appetite. If that distress increases, then they may seek help. Temporary impairments may be that individuals have some mild depression, generalized anxiety, maybe some ADHD patients might fit into this category. The most severely affected individuals fall into mental illness on that continuum. There's altered thinking, altered mood, behavior. Those all become a real big concern. So a distinguishing factor for this group is marked distress with moderate to disabling impairment. We will all at some point maybe fall somewhere on this continuum. That shift may be gradual, it may be sudden. Some people may never move into the mental illness side, and some will reach that severe level and recover and be able to lead a very satisfying life. So what do I mean when I say individual attributes? That really refers to those inborn and learned characteristics that make us who we are. We all can manage our thoughts, feelings, and everyday pressures of life in very unique ways. When we talk about resilience, we talk about those individuals that have endured tragedy, maybe loss, trauma, or severe stress, and the ability and capacity to secure resources needed to support that well-being. Resilience does not mean that you aren't affected by stress. It just means that you have that capability to regulate your emotions and not fall victim to those negative thoughts. Some of the characteristics of resilience are optimism, a sense of mastery, or a sense of competence. And these are all these characteristics are really essential to recovery. Perception of mental health and mental illness. There is a distinct difference between mental illness and physical illness. Mental meaning brain and the higher thought process. Physical meaning the connections, functions, and spinal innervations. The biggest perception of mental illness is that psychiatric disorder implies that it's all in our head, right? We're talking about the brain.